Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we have a early impression video on a house that I absolutely adore. Actually, I think it's one of the best niche houses in the game. I think every single fragrance from this house that I've had a chance to smell, and I've done videos on a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them, is full bottle worthy in my opinion. And actually, the ones that I have not done videos on, I have full bottles of. And is this one going to be full bottle worthy for me? Find out. So this is actually a fragrance that I've been sort of testing on and off for almost a year now. About a year ago, I very luckily received a package in the mail from a friend, and it turned out to be the entire sample set of Papillon. And then getting to interact with Liz Moores and picking her brain about her inspiration. She actually came on the channel. It was a real pleasure. Those interviews with perfumers, I think, are probably some of the best content that I've put out on YouTube. And Liz Moores kind of came on for about an hour. We probably could have talked for 5 hours, honestly, but I know she's a busy woman. And, you know, we talked about a broad range of topics, but go check that interview out if you haven't had a chance to watch it yet. But today we are going to talk about one of her creations that has been sorely missing from my review catalog, so I'll add this to the Papillon playlist, if you will, and this is called Dryad. And Dryad, I don't know if you can see the note listing very well right there, but she highlighted a handful: Narcissus, Oak Moss, Galbanum, Costus, Jonquil, and Cedrat, okay? And so it's interesting, though, she highlighted Narcissus and Jonquil. Jonquil is like a subcategory of Narcissus, a type of Narcissus flower, if you will, type of daffodil. And so this fragrance, before I say anything about it, I want to say that if you want a true gauge of how I feel, go watch Thomas from Early Greek's Early Impression, his first impression video on Dryad. Go watch his response. Literally, it gave me chills watching him because he said exactly what I feel. Just in Thomas ways. No one can recreate that sort of excitement the way that Thomas does about smelling a fragrance for the very first time. And so I'm going to read you a little blurb about the scent, and then we're going to talk about it. But in a nutshell, you should know that this is a green chypre, okay? And it's a vintage green chypre. So this is a niche house doing a vintage green chypre to absolute perfection. And I understand why this doesn't have very many videos up on it. Actually, there's only like a handful of videos on YouTube about this fragrance. And it's because I think that this sort of green chypre style can be tough for some people, especially the newcomers. It's very easy when you first really get into perfume to go, I don't like green fragrances, they're not for me. And you know, I did that for a time, but once you really get into it, you realize that this is a very important genre, and one with many interwoven parts into other part of perfumery that I love. And so it's hard as a perfume lover to just go, I don't like green chypres, I'm not going to wear any or smell any, or, you know, nope, they're not for me. It's tough because so much of inspiration for perfume that you end up loving down the road came from these old vintage style green chypres. So let me read the blurb from the Papillon website. 50 mils sells for 142 pounds, I believe it is, from the Papillon website. And so the notes basically from her website, and I'll read the whole list of notes at one point in the video, but the notes that she chose to highlight on the website are Narcissus, Oak Moss, Jonquil, Cedrat, Galbanum, Benzoin, and Vetiver. She's added 3 more than what is highlighted right here, and she's not highlighting Costus, which I can see why. Costus can be a challenging note. Some say it can smell like a little bit of a wet dog, but there is a little bit of an animalic aspect to this, but it's all blended beautifully. So here's what she writes about it on her website. And the picture almost looks like, if you go to her website, you can see this picture of a Dryad bottle sitting in a forest with light shining through. It almost looks like an elven forest, you know, like an elf has came along and cast a spell on the Dryad bottle, and it's just illuminating in this green forest. So as vibrant emerald galbanum weaves the delicate flesh of bergamot, the nomadic wanderings of Dryad begin. Beneath jade canopies, sweet-herbed Narcissus nestles with gilded jonquil. Shadows of apricot and cedrat morph radiant greens to a soft golden glow. Earthed within the acro roots of benzoin. Heady oak moss entwines with deep vetiver hues. So you can already get this picture, right? And at its heart, the slick skin of costus beckons you further into the forest, or beckons some and maybe pushes some away. But we'll get into the animalic bits in this fragrance as well. So it says, our perfumer's inspiration. Settled in silence, I utter no words, but my lashes flash fluent in the language of birds. My fingertip feathers, the sparkled patois of floral my skin, steeped in sunlight, flows smoothly with fauna. The hushes of rushes steal sounds from the wind. Is it often lamented, the weight of my tongue, or the vetiver ash that rests in my lungs? Wordless in woodlands my senses can sing. Sound is not needed to speak from within. I press soft flesh to bark in the evening's gold dust, to breathe heavy hues of a satyr's musk. My body is swelling with the oak's root and seed our veins and our vines weave together with ease. And as your chatter dispels at the shake of our leaves, you set your ear to our chest to hear the whisper of trees. We rise not in your throat, nor your mouth, nor your teeth, but we streak-colored stems set to dazzle. When your eyes close in the chaos of our heady wood drowns, and heavy with ache in the spectrum of colors you've found, I hold you close. Ignore tingles and deafen sounds. Breathe the dark of your eyelids. Our damp forest floor rises. The lilac of lavender soothes dwindling sight. The essence of our bodies sap-stained, perfume soars above oak beams. Drenched in silver light, I press the soft suede of an apricot sheath to your lips. The sweetness jars with narcissus bitter. Head tilted, enchanted, you breathe your first breath. With the timbre of touch I lead you, bereft of sight and of sound, but with guilt dew on your skin. Each of your pursed pores unravels, and the forest seeps in. I watch moist emerald moss survive in the sun. I catch burnished bronze leaves that fall from each stem. While dwelled in the canopy, I skim saplings in starlight and dust-gilded galbanum through the dim of the glen. From autumn to summer, from winter to spring, I glow. The branches and bough are open. The changing of seasons ticks with the sun. Each color prints petal marks to rest at your chest. It is dappled with wolf's blood and slick of deer's tongue. Roses creep at my ankles, bergamot blooms, clary sage clouds you with billowing fumes. And here in my tree I watch you awaken. I do not hide behind trunk or stem. So dance with the dryads, sip all you have taken, fall behind, deaf and drunk in the pearl of the glen. Whisper so soft, your breath on my neck without words, inhale at the bough of my tree. What are words in a wilderness? Save your lament. I spin voices and chants with the power of scent. My touch lifts you to heights of nature, true worth, and I speak every word with the fragrance of earth. Wow. So apparently, maybe Liz Moore's daughter wrote that, because it says copyright Jasmine Moores. I'm guessing that's her daughter. Interesting, her daughter's name is Jasmine. But so that was longer than I thought it was. First of all, I did not expect that to be that long until I started reading. I could not scroll down and see the end of it. So sorry to those of you who are not into poetry, but that was a beautiful poem. And I think it does highlight the scent pretty well. And actually, what's interesting about that is there's a little, if you go to Lucky Scent, they tell a little bit about the perfumer. And this is how Lucky Scent describes Liz Moore's. It says, Liz Moore's lives in a house deep inside the New Forest, surrounded by a menage of children, horses, and animals that she has rescued and nurtured. Given that the forest forms a protective ring around Liz and her animals, it makes sense that Dryad feels like her most personal perfume yet, inspired by its nymphs and said to dwell in oak trees according to Greek mythologies. There's the name. Dryad is a Slavic fantasy of friendly trees linking their branches together to form a sunlit green canopy over your head, although far sexier and more ruggedly outdoors than anything from Guerlain or Dior. Fans of vintage Vol de Nuit and Miss Dior will still feel a thrill of recognition at Dryad's damp, mossy heart of galbanum, narcissus, and an overdose of genuine oak moss. We'll talk about that. Smoky, tough galbanum and clary sage add a resinous, rubbery, dry warmth to the moistness of the green heart. And there is a touch of sunburnt hay by way of deer tongue, a plant rich in coumarin and vanilla, and often used to flavor tobacco. Costus and apricot add a sly hint of naughty inner thigh, but just a hint. Dryad is a shamanic, witchy, but also relaxed scent that coaxes open the rigidly classical lines of the classic green chypre, ushering in sunlight, herbs, and a bunch of bright aromatics. The result is a green goddess of a fragrance, and the first green chypre that belongs more in the forest than in the boardroom. Okay, so we can debate whether fans of Vol de Nuit or Miss Dior will think that Dryad is sexier or more rugged. That's talk for another time. And the reason I spent so much time reading you these two little blurbs about the scent is that this is a very complex scent. So no matter what I say, I always feel like there's something more to be said, if that makes sense. And so the very first spray, when you first spray this on your skin for the very first time, you will almost get this photorealistic greenness, okay? And think of the inside of a stem or a plant, or, quickly though, what ends up happening is that green sort of fairy tale image of being inside of, smelling the inside of a plant, or, if you take one of those daffodil flowers that she mentions twice between Narcissus and Jonquil, and you break open the stem, let's say, and it releases that sort of milky greenness, right? That's the very first spray. But very quickly what ends up happening is these animalic notes rush to the forefront, almost like rush to rescue the scent before it goes down into a pure green, fantasy. So what ends up happening is what comes forward is this dark animalic mix of notes. And these animalic notes to my nose are a lot of castoreum, maybe a little bit of civet, and this costus note that she talks about a couple times. And they give it this deep vintage style tobacco, okay? So earlier they mentioned this sunburnt hay by way of deer tongue, which is a plant rich in coumarin and vanilla and often used to flavor tobacco. And there is this instantly, okay, so before we talk about any of the other green fragrances from the 70s that this sort of pays homage to, let's talk about the one that popped into my head at the very first fragrance that popped into my head when I wore this. There was one, okay? And that fragrance is this. It's actually one of my favorite leather fragrances for women, and that's why I say it's hard to say I don't like green chypres, because I guess technically you could call this a green leather chypre. And this is Bandit by the house of Robert Piguet. These older bottles are absolutely stunning. If you can get an old bottle of Bandit and you love leather, my God, man. But you know what? This is sort of one of those fragrances that was put out when I think of it as like the women's, not suffrage, but women's enlightenment period was still in full bloom. Like, we're going to go out and smoke and there's nothing you can do about it. That kind of feeling, right? This came out in the 1940s as the men were still fighting World War II. This was 1944. World War II was still in full bloom. And so you have to think the woman going and doing some of the jobs in the factories and stuff like that, they were coming home to empty houses or houses with kids, but no man there, right? And so they wanted to go out and spread their wings as well and still have fun in ways that maybe were considered to be unseemly a couple decades ago for women. And so there's this tobacco element to this, and there's a very similar tobacco element to the creation of Amanita in the 20s, but this is the 40s, and this is much butcher, and Amanita still has that sort of soft, heliotrope, ambery glow. I think it's a very, come hither fragrance. This is like a get the fuck out of my way, I will run you over kind of fragrance. To me anyways, it is. And I love that about this. This is no hold. This is the kind of fragrance I love. This is the kind of fragrance that really sparked my love for vintage fragrances. And I ended up finding a backup bottle of this. Thank God. I will never want to be without Bandit. But Bandit is the fragrance that actually popped into my head first. And it's something to do with that deer tongue note in here, that, that tobacco flavoring. It really reminds me of the green, heavy, butch, in-your-face opening. And I think it's two notes, in my opinion. I think there's two main notes, and that is tarragon and galbanum. And those two notes kind of come together with this. Now, one thing I will say, though, is Dryad doesn't have the leather aspect of Bandit. So I want you to imagine I'm describing Bandit. It does have some leathery castoreum in it, but it doesn't have the full-on base leather, that Bandit has. So the leather is much more turned up in this. Whereas Dryad, the animalics combine to kind of give it this very classic blend, but it always stays true to maybe some of the predecessors, the green chypre predecessors that came before. Very classic animalic, dark, green, slightly leathery chypre. Not as much as, not like the butch leather in Bandit, but that's the fragrance that actually popped into my head first. I said, wow, Liz Moore's made a fragrance that harkens back to basically, these vintage fragrances of the past. And if you go watch our interview, she talks a little bit about how her grandmother's fragrances influenced her, how she still wears Shalimar to this day, how she loves vintage fragrances, how, when she was a younger girl and you're sort of stealing a kiss with a boy, let's say, at school or something, it was the smell of Antaeus and Koros and stuff like that that were on the, the men or the boys at the time. And so she has an affinity for vintage fragrances. And the first thing that I noticed when I got to get to know Dryad is that this is a fragrance made by somebody who has a deep knowledge and understanding of the past and an appreciation of the past. Because this is not something that you create and put out to sell units. Now, this may sell to the frag heads like us, but I think the average person that is going to walk into a store and buy this, or walk into a store and look for a perfume and they don't really know what they want, this would be challenging to them at first. However, that's exactly why you should love it, because if you're watching this content, you're probably someone that doesn't want the average. You're done with the average. You want something new and different. And I've said it a million times before, and I'll say it again. The only way to go forward in your perfume journey is to go to the past. This is a fragrance that allows you to go to the past and sort of understand what the past was about without really going to the past. 2017, this was released. And so, she basically created this niche fragrance that harkens back to the past, but she was able to add her little touches into it. And we'll talk about some of that as well. So imagine this jungle theme. So every time now when someone says jungle, you immediately think of synthetic jungle, right? Imagine the name synthetic jungle and you remove the synthetic part and you put, let's say, a realistic jungle. Imagine this realistic jungle feeling. And I don't know about many of you, but I have never walked through an actual jungle. So this is just how I have to sort of imagine it. But I just imagine this walk through a jungle, and you imagine sort of slightly being cautious at first and peering around every tree, and you can sort of look through the foliage of the jungle and maybe see what's ahead, see where the path leads you, see if you can see some of the birds in the trees through the foliage, squawking, or whatever you imagine to be in a jungle, animals. And you just are, it's almost like your vision and your nose are obscured by this amazing green smell of the forest, of this green jungle forest, if you will. And it does open up slightly dry, okay? So when you first spray, like I said, at first to me, it's almost like breaking the stem of a daffodil, or you get a little bit of that green milkiness from the stem, and then very quickly you get that animalic rush. But even when the animalic rush comes forward, it comes forward very dry, and maybe that's part of the reason why that tobacco-y, dry tobacco reminded me a lot of Bandit in the first hour or so. For the first hour, I would say this is the fragrance that kept coming to mind. And that dryness played a big part of it. However, you will notice a marked difference once you get to about the 45-minute mark. 45 minutes to an hour, depending on how it progresses on your skin, maybe even half an hour, but around the 45-minute mark is where I really start to take notice of this change. And it starts to turn slightly more friendly, okay? I'm not going to say sweet, but slightly more friendly. It starts to peek its way through the trees. You see a friend around the corner in the foliage through the trees, right? And almost like the jungle looked terrifying when you first entered the jungle, and now that you're in the jungle, you're realizing that it's actually a friendly story that you're in. Nothing's going to jump out of the shadows and attack you. It's not as terrifying. You know, you can see the butterflies maybe traveling through the jungle, hence the butterfly, this rebirth facet of life, if you will. And you know, you realize that you're having a great time amongst the animals and the insects and the foliage and the trees and the bushes and all of that stuff, right? Maybe you come across like I don't know, some edible berries or something, and you're just enjoying your time out there in the jungle much more than you thought you would. And the friendly side starts to come out. And what's happening is I think she's using a little bit of her signature. If Liz Moore's had like a signature move, it would be this iris. She is a master at using this iris note in a way that is, you know, this iris, butter, if you will. Some people say, oh, you know, I'd put Francesca Bianchi in Liz Moore's club. No, Liz Moore's to me absolutely annihilates Francesca Bianchi. Everything Liz Moore's creates is full bottle worthy to me. Everything Francesca Bianchi creates is sort of eh. They both try and do this iris signature move, but for me, Liz Moore's executes it properly, and this iris starts to sort of come along, and with the iris comes the fruitiness of the apricot. And in the breakdown, they said, oh, the fruitiness of the apricot gives you this inner thigh sexiness. I think it gives you this sort of friendliness, you know, this, you get this fruitiness. And for people who, and Thomas said this in his first impression video, and I agree. He said this would be a great fragrance for somebody who wants to be, you know, wants to experience what a green chypre is all about, but do it in a way where it's not going to, you know, bite their head off, that kind of thing. Do it in a slightly friendly way. And to me, the fruits and, you know, the way that it starts to turn friendlier as you can still sort of pick out, even I've got like a 6.5 hour dry down here, and you can still pick out the animalics. I mean, they last. You get the castoreum, you get the costus, you get the, there's another animalic note here too, Liatris spicata absolute, which always I find that a little bit challenging. But amongst those elements, there's also some citruses that are slightly pleasant. There is bitter orange, there's bergamot, and there's citron fruit. And citron fruit almost has this like rindy element to it. So if you ever seen like a citron fruit, it's almost like all rind. There's very little, you know, fruit in there. It's a lot of rind and peel. And those notes sort of blend together with the beauty of like the Turkish rose, and some of the more common elements start to come out, let's say after the hour mark, the orange blossom, the lavender, you know, those kind of the ylang ylang, a little more friendly notes, let's say. That's why I think this is a great starter green chypre for people. It's a brilliant composition where she uses her signature iris in just a mind-blowingly beautiful way. And, you know, it really allows you to go down into the heart, almost like going deeper into the jungle, but in a friendly manner, if that makes sense. And it's so different the way she uses her iris. If you want to check out a couple other iris fragrances from her that are mind-blowing, check out Angelique, and also check out Hera. Hera shocked me by its beauty. The ambrette and the iris combination in there is, I mean, it's like Dior Eat Your Heart Out almost good. It is, it's fantastic. And I, even though she created that for her daughter, I would absolutely own a full bottle of that. It is a little bit more expensive, but there's some really good stuff in there. So, So I mentioned you'll smell that fruitiness that starts to make it more playful. And it just, the other thing it does, it makes it less of a serious fragrance. To me, green chypres can be extremely serious. I think of, you know, grown-up women in executive positions, or, you know, that's the kind of thing that comes to mind. No messing around. This style where it brings in a little bit more of these more friendly elements as the hours tick by, to me, adds just a little bit of playfulness. This is still a serious fragrance, don't get me wrong. This is a classic green chypre made off of sort of the backs of green chypres from the years gone by. And it's funny because, you know, if you go watch reviews of this, there's one fragrance that everyone throws out, or it seems like everyone throws it out to me, and that's this. This is Vol de Nuit. My bottle doesn't have the propeller. I don't care. It's all about the juice. My propeller fell off, but I honestly don't care because it's all about the juice inside. And to me, this is the best version of Vol de Nuit. I have the EDT. The EDT is nice. The Extrait is on another level. It is, you know, just, it's on another level, honestly. And it starts to, as the playfulness starts to come out more, it starts to go a little bit away from Bandit, although it's always in the background. It's almost like Bandit just shrinks in the background, and Vol de Nuit starts to sort of come out, along with other green chypres from the past. You know, you'll smell traces of stuff like Private Collection, which is a stunning green chypre. So underrated. And this has this honeysuckle note in here that is just mouth-wateringly beautiful. You'll smell little traces of number 19, and you'll smell little traces, as they mentioned earlier, of Miss Dior. And again, there's a little bit of a tobacco vibe in Miss Dior as well, to me anyways. And so you can sort of see the type of fragrance this is. This is a very serious take on a vintage fragrance. And this is where really the rubber meets the road for me for this scent, because, you know, this basically, I told you to watch Thomas from Early Greek's video on this. It's not a very long video, but it's a first impression, and just look at his response. And he says that when he smells it, behind the scenes, he can almost see this crazy scaffolding of, you know, notes and accords holding everything together. And, you know, it's almost like this complex creativity of it all underneath. And this is where it all sort of comes together, because you get the opening, that Bandit opening. You get the Vol de Nuit or Miss Dior, whatever you prefer, you know, classic structure sort of coming from behind. And then she meshes it all together with her style, her modern touch, with that iris and, you know, the fruity apricot or nectarine or whatever you want to call it. And there's a little touch of star anise in here. The oak moss in the base, it's so textured. That's why it really feels like being in a forest, because of just how textured it is. It's green, but it's also resinous. You know, there's Peru balsam, there's styrax, there's benzoin. And there's a molecule called woodland, which I actually don't know what it is. It's some sort of a captive molecule that doesn't get used very often. I'm not sure what woodland is, but you know, for green, floral, spicy, woody chypre, I mean, for modern times with this classic DNA, I honestly don't know what more you could ask for. And so I ended up buying a bottle. I bought a bottle off of a friend. I bought a partial from my Polish connection, and who knows when it'll arrive. Hopefully soon. Hopefully before the end of the year, let's say. She's going to be sending this beautiful stash of fragrances that she was very kind enough to acquire for me to Rich Mitch, and then Rich Mitch is going to hopefully pass it on to a good friend who wants to remain anonymous, and then it's going to get hauled across the ocean one day, hopefully by the end of the year. To me, fingers crossed, that'll be a hell of a haul. That'll be probably one of my last big hauls, is my guess, because I don't plan on doing any other big hauls. I've got one or two other things sort of in the works, and that's pretty much it. I'm going to enjoy what I have and do these videos that I've been sitting on. Like, I've been sitting on this for almost a year. Wore it to bed a couple times and been contemplating doing a video, but today, wearing it as my scent of the day, today was the time. So I've really enjoyed getting to know Dryad, and honestly, one of the best niche houses for someone who's new to the game. You know, a lot of people, when they begin to really get into fragrances and they see all of this, you know, they see 800 bottles that people have, and, you know, and they just start to acquire everything. Don't do that. Don't just go buy everything. Try to be more selective in what you buy. This is a house that I think is great for somebody who wants to take the next step and they're excited to acquire maybe a lot. Maybe they like collecting a whole line. Maybe there's someone that likes collecting a whole line of offerings from a brand. This is a great brand to start with because you can buy every single one from this brand and you will not get a bad fragrance. You'll get Bengal Rouge that's a little bit like Shalimar, a little bit like this Le Lion Shalimar vibe. You'll get, like I said, Dryad. It's a classic green sheeper. You'll get Anubis, which is unbelievable, with the Egyptian jasmine and the resins in that, the amberiness. And then Salome, of course, has that animalic, you know, modern Bala Versailles vibe to me. And there's so many little offerings from the house that you can buy every single one from the house. Angelique, Tobacco Rose, Spell 125, and Hera. Actually, Spell 125 is probably the weakest to me, even though I know so many people love that fragrance. But Spell 125 for me didn't do enough for me to go, that's the one I'd want to buy. I'd probably just buy, you know, something that was slightly similar, you know, this Feeling Agile-like vibe, which I already have, or even Atlantic Ambergris by Arise Ladore, that white ambergris pine thing. That was the one that didn't move me enough to say that's if I was gonna collect bottles from her, believe it or not, Spell 125 would probably be the last one that I would get. But I would love Hera, Tobacco Rose, Bengal Rouge, Angelique. Those are the 4 that are really on the full bottle list still. Now that Dryad has been acquired, even though it's a partial bottle, it's more than enough for me. So pleasure and honor, you know, to get to do this. Thank you to you-know-who procured this sample set for me all those months ago. And so if you have experience with the House of Papillon or Dryad, I would love to know your thoughts. Leave it in the comments. We're still small enough to where I can reply to every single comment. So if you leave a comment, you'll get a reply from me. And we are coming up on 4,000 subscribers. And so one thing I will say is once we get to that 4,000 subscriber mark, we're going to have a very special 4,000 subscriber video that I plan on doing for everybody. So thanks for watching. Cheers, guys, and I'll catch you guys next time. Bye-bye.